Human catches alien girl practicing human kissing on mirror. She panics instantly. Kale froze, his hand still on the latch of the private chamber's door, the faint, shimmering light from within spilling onto the polished obsidian floor of the Ethel Temple. He'd only been trying to find a refresher station, having misread the intricate glyphs that marked the various zones of this colossal, levitating structure. Instead, he'd stumbled into what appeared to be a personal antechamber, dominated by a large reflective surface. Not glass, but a darkly polished stone that hummed with a subtle energy, and before it a figure. Seraphina. Her back was to him, her posture rigid, even in what Kale assumed was a private moment. Her species, the Earthos, were known for their profound emotional restraint, a trait Kale found both fascinating and infuriating. Her skin, a deep azure, seemed to absorb the ambient light, only to release it in faint, shifting patterns that rippled across her shoulders and down her slender back. A soft, continuous hum emanated from her, a sound Kale had learned was characteristic of the Earthos when deep in thought or concentration. He watched, captivated by the subtle, almost imperceptible motions. Seraphina brought a hand, elongated and graceful, to her lips, pressing her digits lightly against them. Then she leaned towards the mirror, her lips, naturally a pale silver, barely parted. She tilted her head, then repeated the motion, a peculiar, almost hesitant stretching of the muscles around her mouth. Kale's brow furrowed. It took him a moment too long, to process the bizarre tableau. Then it hit him like a rogue asteroid. She was practicing a human kiss, not a peck, not a polite brush, but a full-on, puckered, slightly awkward human kiss. His breath hitched, a small, involuntary sound. Seraphina's shimmering skin instantly flared from azure to a vibrant, almost painful violet. Her body went stiff, rigid as a statue. She spun around, her head snapping up, revealing eyes that were usually pools of cool, dark starlight, now blazing with an uncharacteristic intensity. Her posture was the picture of a predator caught unawares, every line of her body screaming coiled tension. The elegant, intricate weave of her ceremonial robes, usually so serene, seemed to bristle with her sudden agitation. Kale swallowed, finding his voice surprisingly thick. Just looking for the water fountain? Hydration station? Your version of a public tap? His Earth idioms, usually a source of mild amusement or blank stares from the Earthos, now felt like a desperate, flailing attempt to deflect. Seraphina's gaze, usually so controlled, flickered wildly, darting between his face and the polished mirror. The violet glow intensified, pulsing with a frantic rhythm. Her vocal cords, typically capable of producing complex harmonic utterances, seemed to lock. All that came out was a sharp, guttural click, like stones grinding together, a sound Kale had never heard from her before. He'd seen her face down a hostile delegation with the calm of a still lake, negotiate a complex resource agreement without so much as a twitch. But this was pure, unadulterated panic, alien and raw. Her hands, which had been raised to her lips, now clenched into tight fists, the delicate filaments of her fingertips almost vibrating. The air in the chamber, usually cool and still, felt charged, as if Kale had disturbed some ancient silent energy. "What?" "I can explain," Kale began, then immediately regretted it. Explain what? That he'd seen her trying to figure out how to smush her face against a reflective surface? It sounded ridiculous even in his own head. He raised his hands in a gesture of peace, a human reflex. No judgment, honestly. Just curious. Cultural exchange, right? The violet light on her skin pulsed again. A violent throb. Seraphina didn't move, didn't speak. She just watched him, her eyes wide, alien, and suddenly, terrifyingly vulnerable. It was a look that cracked the cold, formal mask she usually wore, revealing something raw and exposed beneath. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, punctuated only by the frantic thrumming of her skin. Kale realized he had just violated a sacred, unspoken rule of Earthos privacy, or worse, discovered a hidden, deeply personal vulnerability in a being whose entire existence was predicated on stoicism. He suddenly felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temple's climate controls. Seraphina's stillness was a profound thing. Heavier than any fury, the shimmering violet of her skin settled into a deeper, almost bruised hue, reflecting the intensity of the internal chaos she was trying to contain. Kale could almost hear the gears of her alien mind grinding, trying to process this unprecedented breach. He was a trespasser, not just in a physical space, but in a moment of private, utterly unearthos vulnerability. The conclave, the ruling body of the Ethel temples, held emotional self-restraint as the highest honor. Any public display of internal turmoil, especially one rooted in something as inherently physical and uncontrolled as a human romantic gesture, would be an unimaginable disgrace for an heiress of her standing. "You witnessed," Seraphina finally managed, her voice a low, raspy whisper completely devoid of its usual melodic precision. It was not a question. It was an accusation, flat and heavy. Her gaze fixed on his, sharp and unblinking. Kale felt a trickle of sweat run down his spine. I did," he admitted, opting for uncomfortable honesty. "Accidentally, I swear. I was trying to find the purification cascades." He pointed vaguely down the corridor, referring to the ornate ablution chambers. Seraphina's expression remained unreadable, though the subtle shift in the light on her skin hinted at a complex internal battle. "The purification cascades are 2 sections west, past the meditation spires," she stated, her voice regaining a fraction of its usual formality, though the underlying tension still vibrated in her tone. "This is the private contemplation antechamber of the lineage of the first resonance." Ah, right. He'd walked into the equivalent of her bedroom, or perhaps, given the Earthos reverence for privacy and ritual, something far more sacred. "My bad," Kale muttered, running a hand through his hair. "Really? Look, it's just a kiss. Humans do it all the time. It's a greeting, a sign of affection, a thing. Nothing to get your tendrils in a twist about." Seraphina flinched, a subtle recoil that Kale almost missed. He'd meant it as reassurance, but his casual dismissal of her private exploration, combined with the slang term tendrils, likely registered as further disrespect. The Earthos had delicate bioluminescent tendrils woven into their head crests, used for complex emotional signaling and communication, which he'd just inadvertently mocked. "It is not merely a thing," Seraphina retorted, her voice regaining its cutting edge, though still a note higher than usual. "It is a physical expression of profound resonance, as indicated in your cultural archives. To observe it in preparation, without ritual context, is an unforgivable intrusion." Her eyes narrowed, the starlight within them hardening to chips of obsidian. "And to attempt to replicate such a sacred act without a bond mark for the purpose of data acquisition is an unsanctioned transgression." Kale blinked. "Data acquisition? I wasn't collecting data. Look, I saw a video. Your people gave me access to some human historical files. It was part of the Cultural Exchange Initiative." He remembered a brief, slightly awkward module on human courtship rituals. Someone had certainly gone into detail on kissing. Seraphina's gaze swept over him, then back to the mirror as if confirming the scene for herself. The violet on her skin faded slightly, replaced by a cool, almost frigid blue. She was regaining her composure, but the chill in the air was palpable. "The Cultural Exchange Initiative does not sanction the mimicry of intimate human behaviors by an unbonded Earthos, especially a lineage heir," she declared, her voice now sharp and precise, every syllable a carefully aimed dart. "Your presence here, your observation, it is a violation of the highest order. The conclave will be informed." Kale felt a sinking sensation. "The conclave? For this? Come on, Seraphina. It was an accident. I'm a visitor, a diplomat. I'm not supposed to know all your super-secret privacy rules." He gestured helplessly around the silent chamber. "And what am I going to tell them?" That you were checking out human kissing techniques? That's not going to make either of us look good. Her expression was one of cold, alien fury. The blue on her skin rippled, and a faint, almost imperceptible hum of contained power vibrated in the air around her. He just turned a personal humiliation into a potential political disaster. Seraphina's slender fingers flexed, the subtle hum around her intensifying to a low thrum that vibrated through the polished floor. "The shame of this accidental exposure is my own," she stated, her voice a low, steady current, now devoid of the earlier panic, replaced by an unsettling calm. "However, your observation, your presence in a restricted zone, and your continued flippant commentary on sacred cultural acts cannot be dismissed. The conclave must be informed." Cale felt his patience, a commodity usually in short supply, begin to fray. "Look, I get it. You're embarrassed. I'm embarrassed for you. But we can just pretend this never happened. Can't we? No harm, no foul. I'll delete my memory banks. I'll sign a non-disclosure agreement. Whatever you want." Her gaze was unblinking. Pretend that an unsanctioned intrusion into the contemplation chamber of a lineage heir did not occur. That an unbonded human observed a forbidden exploration of intimate cultural data. That the sanctity of the first resonance lineage was not compromised. She paused, each question a hammer blow. Such a pretense would be a falsehood. The Earthos value truth above all else. This cannot be undone. It must be addressed. Cale sighed, running a hand over his face. Addressed? What does addressed mean? More rituals? More trials? Another week of staring at each other across a table while you decide if I'm a threat or a nuisance? He knew the Earthos loved their elaborate processes. He'd been through a dozen already since his scout ship crash-landed on their planet ring mining ruins, getting caught between rival factions he still didn't entirely understand. "It means," Seraphina said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, though its intensity amplified, "that the conclave will convene. They will deliberate your fate. And mine." The blue on her skin flickered, and Cale realized that beneath the carefully constructed mask of composure, there was still a hint of the frantic violet. Her shame, her fear was profound. "My lineage is bound by ancient oaths. This incident, it implies a deficiency in my emotional self-restraint, a breach of honor that could have repercussions for my entire ancestral recognition. My role as the lineage's guardian, the destined weaver of the Ethel Temple's primary resonance, it is now in question." Cale stared at her, the gravity of her words finally sinking in. This wasn't just about him seeing her trying to pucker up. This was about lineage, honor, and the very fate of her floating city. "Okay, wait, my bad. Serious bad. What can I do?" he asked, genuinely. "Is there some kind of ritual atonement? A public apology? Do I have to kiss a mirror myself to show solidarity?" He offered the last part with a grimace, knowing how ridiculous it sounded. Seraphina's lips, those same lips that had been tentatively exploring a foreign gesture moments ago, pressed into a thin, unyielding line. "There are protocols. For such an intrusion, the customary measure is purification or severance." Purification or severance. He'd heard those terms. Purification usually involved elaborate, prolonged rituals of penance. Severance meant being permanently cut off from the temple, even from the planet, or worse, being rendered permanently unresonant, a state of non-existence in Earthos spirituality. A diplomat's mission turned into an existential crisis. Just his luck. "So, I get exiled or I go through some spiritual detox, and you get to keep your job?" Cale pressed, trying to understand the stakes. "Is that what you're saying?" Seraphina's gaze swept over him, assessing, measuring. "No," she stated, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. "I am saying that my duty as lineage heir is to ensure the integrity of the Earthos culture and the safety of the Ethel temples. Your presence, now irrevocably tied to this unsanctioned incident, presents a profound challenge. The conclave may rule that your expulsion is insufficient." Cale felt a cold dread settle in his gut. What could be worse than expulsion? He looked around the chamber again at the ancient, humming mirror, at the rigid, silently fuming alien woman. He had a very bad feeling about where this was going. The summons from the conclave arrived swiftly, a shimmering holographic scroll delivered by a silently gliding drone. Kale felt like a schoolboy called to the principal's office, but with cosmic-level stakes, Serafina was already there when he arrived in the Grand Resonance Hall, a vast, echoing chamber at the very heart of the central Eiffel Temple. She stood rigidly before the elevated platform where the conclave elders sat, their forms obscured by veils of woven light, only their ancient, resonant voices projecting into the space. Her azure skin was completely devoid of its earlier violet or blue flares, a testament to her absolute control. She looked like a statue carved from cosmic ice. The lead elder, a voice like grinding glaciers, began, "Kale of Terra, you stand accused of trespassing on a sacred private chamber, of observing an unsanctioned cultural exploration by a lineage heir, and of demonstrating a flagrant disregard for Earthos cultural sanctity." Kale bristled. "Unsanctioned cultural exploration? Sirs? I just saw her." Portia. He cut himself off, remembering Serafina's rigid face. "I apologize. It was an accident. I was lost." The elder's voice reverberated. "Ignorance is not absolution for transgression. However, the nature of the transgression is complex. The lineage heir, Serafina of the First Resonance, admits to a moment of weakness, a curiosity deemed inappropriate for her station. This shared vulnerability observed and participated in, however inadvertently, has created an unforeseen resonance link." Kale's head snapped up. "A what now?" Serafina's posture tightened. If that were possible, the air in the hall thrummed with a strange energy, a subtle vibration that hinted at ancient powers at play. "Through your witnessing, and the subsequent activation of Serafina's deep-seated emotional response," the elder continued, "a preliminary resonance has been initiated. This is a rare, unpredictable outcome, usually reserved for the most profound ceremonial bondings." Kale glanced at Serafina. She looked away, her face a mask of carefully constructed neutrality, but a faint tremor ran through her clenched hands. "So, because I saw her do something embarrassing, we're linked?" Kale asked, his voice incredulous. "Is this like a cosmic what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but it actually links us?" A collective hum, like a distant choir of stars, emanated from the conclave. "Precisely," another elder's voice joined, softer, but no less authoritative. "The energies of the Isle temples recognize bonds based on resonance, not solely on intention. This accidental spark, though originating from a moment of cultural disarray, has awakened a potential connection that cannot be ignored. To sever it would cause spiritual trauma to the heir, and likely catastrophic instability to the core. Resonance of the temple, as her lineage, is intertwined with its very pulse." Kale stared, dumbfounded. "So, what's the solution? Am I stuck with her now? Do I get a free pass to the purification cascades for life?" Serafina finally spoke, her voice clear and resonant, though still carrying a thread of tightly coiled tension. "The conclave has deliberated," she announced, her gaze fixed on a distant point in the hall, refusing to meet Kale's eyes. "Due to the unprecedented nature of this premature resonance link, and the imperative to maintain the integrity of the temple's pulse, a binding solution has been proposed. A ritual completion." Kale felt a chill that wasn't from the temple's cool air. "A ritual completion of what?" he asked. Though he already had a dreadful feeling, Serafina's words landed like stones. "The ritual of the hearth pulse unification. A full resonance binding." Kale's jaw dropped. "You mean a marriage? You're telling me, because I saw you doing weird lip-syncing in a mirror, I have to marry an alien?" His voice, though laced with disbelief, betrayed a flicker of something else. A strange fascination, a jolt of absurd destiny. Serafina still wouldn't look at him, but the faint, Almost imperceptible tremor in her form suggested her own internal turmoil was far from resolved. The weight of ancestral recognition, of bond marks given only once, of ritual survival pairings, pressed down on them both. The air in the grand resonance hall thickened, charged with the weight of ancient law and unexpected fate. Kale looked at Seraphina, who still held herself with the rigid composure of a battle statue, though he could now sense the furious storm raging beneath her calm exterior. The conclave's ruling was clear. The accidental resonance, the preliminary link, necessitated a full hearth pulse unification to prevent spiritual trauma and safeguard the Ethel Temple's core pulse. It was a diplomatic nightmare wrapped in a cultural absurdity. "This is insane," Kale finally managed, his voice low, addressing the conclave. "You're saying because of a misunderstanding. You're forcing two completely different species. Marry? What about consent? What about free will? Don't you guys have that?" The elder's voice echoed. "Consent is implicit in the resonance itself, Kale of Terra. Your accidental observation, and the air's profound reaction, initiated a frequency match. Free will is respected, but the demands of the Eiffel Temple's survival supersede individual preference in matters of existential threat. The temple's pulse must be maintained." Seraphina finally turned her head slightly, her gaze flicking towards him, a brief, sharp flash of what looked like pure agony in her starlight eyes. "The lineage of the first resonance has always prioritized the temple's welfare," she stated, her voice devoid of emotion, though Cal could read the bitter resignation in the tightness around her mouth. "My duty is to ensure the integrity of the resonance. If this means completing the binding, then it shall be so." Kale stared at her, a strange mix of exasperation and grudging admiration swirling within him. She was willing to sacrifice her entire existence for a duty imposed by ancient beliefs, by a single mortifying incident. "And what happens if we don't do it?" Kale pressed, fishing for alternatives. "What's the catastrophic instability? Does the temple fall out of the sky? Do you all turn into dust bunnies?" Another elder's voice, colder this time, answered. "The core resonance would fracture. The Isil temples would drift from their celestial currents, becoming lifeless husks. Our ancestral recognition would cease. The Earthos would be scattered, lost." It was a threat of cultural annihilation. A heavy silence descended. Kale closed his eyes, picturing the vast, beautiful floating cities, the humming energy fields, the ancient, shimmering glyphs that adorned every surface. He hadn't meant to become a living weapon of mass cultural destruction. "Fine," Kale sighed, running a hand over his face. "Fine. What does this hearth pulse unification actually entail? Do I wear a ridiculous hat? Do I have to learn some alien dance moves? Because my rhythm is radas questionable." A faint, almost imperceptible flicker of light passed across Seraphina's skin, a fleeting hint of the earlier violet, before it was sternly suppressed. It was the closest he'd seen her come to an emotional reaction since the mirror incident. The elder's voice, devoid of humor, replied, "The hearth pulse unification involves a physical and spiritual merging. It is a shared ritual of strength and empathy. It binds not only two individuals but their very life currents, their ancestral lines. It is a bond mark given only once." Seraphina, regaining her voice, added with precise formality, "It involves a symbolic weapon bonding, a sharing of life pulse, and a resonance sync. It is designed to create a single, unbreakable current. The ritual begins at the next celestial confluence, in 3 terrestrial rotations, 3 days." Kale felt a strange jolt, a mixture of dread and the perverse, reckless curiosity. This was it. He was about to be symbolically, spiritually, and maybe even physically married to an alien woman he barely knew, all because she wanted to figure out how human lips worked. He looked at Seraphina, truly looked at her, seeing beyond the rigid mask to the desperate queen trapped by duty and ancient law. She looked back, a flicker of something in her deep, starlit eyes that he couldn't quite decipher. Perhaps, in that brief shared glance, a tiny, almost imperceptible thread of trust began to weave itself between them. The three terrestrial rotations passed in a blur of forced lessons and uncomfortable proximity. Serafina, ever the dutiful heiress, took it upon herself to educate Kale on the intricacies of the hearth pulse unification, her demeanor stiff, her instructions precise, utterly devoid of warmth. They met in a secluded training chamber, a place of polished stone and shimmering projections. The resonance binding is a merging of core frequencies, Serafina explained, her voice flat as she demonstrated a complex series of hand movements. Your human physiology will require adaptation. My lineage is intrinsically linked to the temple's central current. Your presence will, by necessity, be integrated into that flow. There will be sensations. Kale watched her, fascinated despite himself. Her movements were fluid, graceful, almost like a slow-motion dance. Sensations? Like what? Do I get a third eye? Can I suddenly speak fluent alien poetry? He tried to inject some humor into the grim proceedings, but Serafina's expression remained unyielding. You will experience a resonance with my own pulse, a sharing of inner space, she stated, her gaze unwavering. Your thoughts may echo, your emotions may be felt. It is intimate. Her use of the word stark and clinical still held a hint of the vulnerability he'd glimpsed that first day. The irony wasn't lost on him. They were being forced into the most profound intimacy, yet she was still a wall of stone. They practiced the symbolic weapon bonding. Serafina presented him with a ceremonial blade, its hilt intricately carved, its blade humming with a faint energy. This represents your strength, your capacity to protect, she explained. You will present it to me at the climax of the ritual, symbolizing your commitment to the lineage's defense. Kale hefted the blade. It felt surprisingly light, almost weightless. So I'm basically your bodyguard, spouse. Sounds like a sweet deal. He offered a sarcastic grin, but it fell flat against her stoic face. It is a sacred duty, Kale of Terra, not a deal. One evening, during a forced meal in her private dining alcove, a delicate soup of luminescent fungi before them, Kale found himself pushing. So, the mirror thing, he began, watching her carefully. Her hand, midway to her mouth, paused. Was it about me? About humans? Serafina slowly lowered her spoon. The air chilled. My private reflections are not for discussion. Right, but we're about to be resonance-bound, Kale persisted. If we're going to share inner space, maybe a little honesty now wouldn't kill us. Were you trying to understand human mating rituals? Or just curious? Serafina's gaze fixed on him, piercing. The conclave had ordered an extensive review of human cultural data in anticipation of further diplomatic exchange. My position as lineage heir required me to understand all facets of your unique customs. Your kissing ritual was deemed perplexing. Perplexing how? Kale prompted, leaning forward slightly. Serafina hesitated. Then, as if under immense internal pressure, she spoke, her voice lower than usual. The absence of visible resonance signatures. The sheer physical commitment for what appears to be a mere greeting. The open emotional vulnerability. It defies Earthos logic. A faint blue blush spread across her azure skin, indicating a deep level of discomfort. I was attempting to rationalize the mechanics. Kale almost smiled. You were trying to understand how to stick your face into another person's face without getting arrested for assault. A microscopic twitch at the corner of Serafina's lips. The blue blush deepened. It was the smallest, most human-like reaction he had ever seen from her, and it sent a strange jolt through Kale. Precisely, she admitted, the word barely a whisper. It seemed illogical, and yet the data indicated it was an essential component of human bonding. She paused, then her voice a shade softer. It was my duty to comprehend. He saw it then, a flicker of something beyond duty and logic, a raw, almost childlike curiosity that had been buried under layers of ritual and expectation. It was a fleeting glimpse into the desperate queen seeking alliance, not just for her people, but for herself. That moment, brief and fragile, was the first real crack in her meticulously constructed facade, a hint of the vulnerability that would later form the foundation of their strange, forced connection. The morning of the Hearth Pulse unification arrived, shrouded in the hushed reverence of the Ethel temples. Keel, clad in a specially woven ceremonial garment that felt strangely soft against his skin, stood in the central chamber, the air thick with the scent of burning incense and the hum of ancient power. The conclave elders, their veiled forms radiating serene power, sat in a semicircle around a central dais. Seraphina entered, and a collective gasp, soft as a sigh, rippled through the gathered Erthos. She wore a robe of pure white, intricately woven with iridescent filaments that caught the light, making her seem to glow from within. Her tendrils, usually tightly bound in an elaborate head crest, now flowed freely, shimmering with soft, ethereal light, hinting at her emotional state. A deep, soulful blue pulsed through them, a color Kel now associated with deep calm, though he suspected it masked profound apprehension. She moved with an almost ethereal grace, her bare feet silent on the polished stone. As she reached the dais, she turned to face Kale, and for the first time since the mirror incident, her gaze locked with his. There was no coldness, no anger, only a profound, almost startling vulnerability. Her lips were parted slightly, and the starlight in her eyes seemed to shimmer with unshed emotion. Kale of Terra, her voice resonated, clear and strong, yet with a subtle tremor that only he seemed to detect. We stand here at the confluence of fate and duty. This binding is not of our choosing, yet it is now our path. Are you prepared to accept the resonance? Kale met her gaze, a strange resolve settling in him. The absurdity of it all, the cosmic joke of his situation, somehow distilled into a singular, intense moment. I am, he said, his voice steady, though I'm still fuzzy on the fine print. A fleeting flicker of something that might have been amusement, or perhaps just a deeper shade of blue, passed across her tendrils, the elder with the glacier voice intoned. The ritual shall now commence. Present the symbolic weapon, Kale of Terra, as a testament to your commitment to the lineage's defense. Kale stepped forward, drawing the humming ceremonial blade from its sheath. He held it out to Seraphina. Her fingers, long and slender, closed around the hilt, brushing against his. A jolt, like a static shock, shot through him. Not painful, but profoundly unsettling. It was more than skin contact. It felt like a ripple across his very being. The air in the chamber vibrated. Seraphina's skin began to glow. Not the panic violet, but a steady, profound blue that pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to sync with his own heartbeat. Her tendrils flared with an intense, almost blinding light. Now, the sharing of the life pulse, the elder commanded. Seraphina drew the blade, its tip humming with an inner light, and touched it to the base of her throat, just above the clavicle, where a faint bioluminescent pulse beat beneath her skin. A tiny bead of silver fluid, her life current, appeared. She offered the hilt of the blade back to Kale. Place your palm here, she instructed, her voice now a strained whisper, and press it to your own pulse point. Kale placed his hand over the hilt, his fingers brushing against hers, then touched the blade's tip to his wrist. He felt a dull throb, a slight sting, and a bead of his own blood welled up, crimson and stark against the shimmering blade. As their life currents met on the blade, a rush of sensations flooded Kale's mind. Not just his own thoughts, but echoes, fragments of Seraphina's consciousness. Images flashed, a vast, silent ocean beneath a shattered moon, the weight of a crown on her brow, the solemn faces of her ancestors, the loneliness of duty. Then, a searing wave of profound, suppressed grief, so intense it made his own chest ache. He saw himself, through her eyes, a crude, noisy human, but also a spark of genuine curiosity, a flicker of warmth, an unexpected kindness. He saw the mirror incident again, not as a source of shame for her, but as an uncontrollable urge to understand, a desperate need to grasp something inherently human, to bridge a gap she had not known existed. The elders began a low, resonant chant, their voices weaving into the thrumming energy of the temple. Seraphina's skin flared with a deep, radiant violet blue, a color of raw, intense emotion. Her tendrils pulsed, throwing shifting patterns of light across the chamber. Her eyes, filled with liquid starlight, were fixed on his, and he saw, clearly, undeniably, the pain of a ritual-bound heiress discovering feeling, and the impossible weight of her buried grief, the physical contact, the shared pulse, the telepathic echoes. It was overwhelming, a deluge of her deepest, most hidden self. He felt the cold tactician, the desperate queen, the lonely leader. He felt her, and in that moment, the absurdity of their situation faded, replaced by something profound and terrifyingly real. A raw, emotional current surged between them, connecting them in a way far deeper than any legal or cultural decree. It was a shared experience of trauma and vulnerability, a sudden, explosive intimacy that tore down every carefully constructed wall. The flood of Seraphina's consciousness, the raw vulnerability of her grief, crashed through Kale's defenses, leaving him breathless. He saw the isolation of her position, the immense pressure of the conclave, the weight of ancestral recognition on her slender shoulders. And in that flash of mirrored memory, he saw the lonely moments in the private chamber, the genuine, childlike wonder as she tried to mimic a human kiss, an act of pure curiosity, not malice. It was a profound emotional reversal. The cold tactician was a fragile, desperate soul. As the elder's chant reached a crescendo, the energy in the chamber intensified. Seraphina's tendrils, now a brilliant, pulsating vortex of blue and violet light, reached out, not physically, but through the psychic link, probing Kale's own inner space. He felt a strange tingling sensation, a warmth spreading through his limbs, as if his own bioelectrical field was being tuned to hers. Her essence, shimmering and vast, wrapped around his, a gentle but firm intertwining. This wasn't merely symbolic. This was a true resonance binding. The sex scene variant of ritual merging through alien senses was happening, not as a physical act in the human sense, but as a total, overwhelming union of consciousness and life force. It was profound, intimate, and entirely alien. A sudden, sharp pain flared in Cal's head, a discordant note in the burgeoning harmony. The comforting resonance of Seraphina's grief shifted, replaced by a metallic taste, a scent of ozone and burning circuitry. Images flashed, not of ancient Erthos, but of jagged, mechanical forms, of cold, calculating eyes, of a vast, spreading void. Anomalous signal, Seraphina's thought voice, now clear and panicked in his mind, sliced through the merging. Intrusion. This is not the resonance. The elder's chant faltered. The very air in the grand resonance hall seemed to crackle with an unexpected, hostile energy. A tremor ran through the polished floor. The soft, luminous veils obscuring the conclave elders flickered, revealing glimpses of their ancient, strained faces. One of the elders, his voice now high-pitched and urgent, cried out, "The core current. It is being fractured, not from the resonance, but from without." Seraphina tore her hand from the ceremonial blade, her eyes snapping open, blazing with an unfamiliar mix of terror and outrage. The radiant blue of her tendrils flared into a frantic, chaotic violet. "They have seized the harmonic conduits," she gasped, her voice echoing in Kale's mind and in the physical space. "The conclave of Thanes, they have breached the outer spire. The conclave of Thanes." Kale remembered the whispers, the stories of a rival bloodline, once part of the conclave, but exiled for their obsession with forbidden, synthetic resonances. They were the false prophet kings of this culture, seeking to corrupt the spiritual for technological gain. The ritual was a distraction, Seraphina cried, her eyes wide with dawning horror. They used our forced binding to create a surge, a weakness in the temple's shields. Kale's mind reeled. He'd just undergone the strangest marriage of his life, only for it to be a massive diversion for an enemy attack. Just his luck. But the connection to Seraphina, the profound intimacy they just shared, though non-physical, had shifted everything. He was no longer just an observer, a victim of circumstance. He was bound to her people, to their fate. The flood of her emotions had created a commitment that transcended the ritual's decree. "What do we do?" Kale asked, his hand instinctively going to the hilt of the ceremonial blade, which now seemed to hum with his own pulse. It felt right in his hand, a strange extension of his new, resonant self. Seraphina turned to him, her eyes still wide but now with a flicker of something new. A desperate hope, a shared resolve. "We fight," she said, her voice clear, infused with the raw power of their new, fragile bond. "We defend the temple. Together." Outside the hall, the sounds of distant explosions, of energy weapons discharging, began to echo through the floating city. The hearth pulse unification, meant to solidify a forced marriage, had instead become the catalyst for an alliance forged in the crucible of battle. The sounds of conflict, muffled at first, now reverberated through the aethal temple, a jarring dissonance against the ancient, harmonic hum of the structure. The core resonance, which had just bound Kale and Seraphina, now pulsed erratically, indicating external strain. The conclave of Thyne's ancient enemies, known for their rogue AI empires and warped understanding of Earthos technology, were exploiting the ritual's energy surge to launch a full-scale assault. "They intend to seize the central harmonic conduit," Seraphina explained, her voice now sharp with a tactical precision that belied the recent emotional upheaval. Her blue skin rippled with light, not in panic, but in fierce determination. "If they succeed, they will drain the temple's pulse, effectively killing it, and my lineage with it." Kale gripped the ceremonial blade, its humming energy a strange comfort. "Lead the way, Seraphina. I'm not exactly an expert on alien temple defense, but I know how to throw a punch." He was a disgraced soldier, yes, but the instincts were still there. The shared trauma, the forced proximity, the profound resonance had solidified into a fierce, protective instinct. He was her protector, whether he liked it or not. She nodded. A brisk, decisive movement. "The quickest path is through the lower archives. It is less guarded, as the Thanes focus on the main access points." She started moving, her white robes flowing behind her like a battle standard, her tendrils still flaring with a deep, resonant blue. Kale followed, his boots echoing on the obsidian floor. The temple, usually a place of serene meditation, was now a battleground. Emergency lighting, usually a soft glow, now pulsed with a harsh crimson, casting long, dancing shadows. They encountered their first resistance in a narrow corridor lined with glowing data crystals. 3 Thane soldiers, their forms encased in angular, dark armors that seemed to absorb light, their faces obscured by grim, metallic visors, emerged from the shadows. They carried energy rifles, their barrels already glowing with hostile intent. "Thane usurpers," Seraphina cried, her voice ringing with ancient authority. "You will not defile this sacred place." The lead Thane simply raised his rifle. "The first resonants are weak, Seraphina. Your lineage is broken. The temple belongs to the new order." Seraphina moved with startling speed. A blur of white and blue. She didn't carry a weapon in the human sense, but her hands, charged with the temple's resonance, became extensions of pure energy. She struck the lead Thane with a palm strike, sending a shockwave of concentrated force through his armor, making him stagger back, his energy rifle sparking. Kill, meanwhile, charged the second Thane, surprising him with a low tackle that sent them both sprawling. He might not have an energy weapon, but his human strength and unpredictability were effective. He used the ceremonial blade, not as a cutting weapon, but as a blunt instrument, slamming its hilt into the Thane's helmet. With a satisfying crunch, the third Thane fired, a searing bolt of energy, narrowly missing Kale's head, scorching the wall behind him. Seraphina, still engaged with the first Thane, sent a telekinetic surge through the air, causing the third Thane's rifle to spark and briefly malfunction. It was enough. Kale was on him in an instant, disarming him with a swift, brutal move he'd learned in a dozen different combat scenarios. He pinned the Than to the wall, ripping off his helmet. Beneath it, a gaunt, sickly face, with eyes that glowed with a faint, corrupted red. "The temple will fall," the Thane rasped, a chilling, fanatic glee in his voice. Seraphina finished off her opponent with a final, devastating blast of concentrated resonance that left the Thane a smoking, inert heap. She turned to Kale, her tendrils pulsing. "Leave him. We must secure the conduits." Kale nodded, releasing the Thane, who slumped to the floor, unconscious. They continued, the sounds of battle growing louder. Seraphina moved with an almost preternatural awareness, dodging collapsing debris, anticipating enemy movements. Kale, meanwhile, found his own senses heightened. He could almost feel the vibrations of the temple's structural integrity, the ebb and flow of its core pulse. The resonance binding, it seemed, wasn't just a spiritual connection. It was a tactical advantage. He felt her intentions, her strategy, before she even voiced them, a silent, powerful communion forged in the heat of conflict. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and completely unified them against the common foe. They fought their way through the labyrinthine corridors, each section bringing more Thanes, more desperation. Kale found himself operating with a terrifying efficiency, his human physicality complementing Seraphina's raw spiritual power. She would disable, disrupt, and he would follow through, his blade a blur, his fists delivering brutal, precise blows. The ceremonial blade, once just a symbol, now hummed with a purpose, a true extension of their combined will. The bond between them, deepened by each shared glance, each telepathic echo of strategy, each gasp of pain. They reached the chamber housing the central harmonic conduit, a massive, crystalline structure that pulsed with the very life of the Ethel temples. Several Thanes, including a heavily armored leader, were already there, working to reroute the energy flow, their tools sparking as they forced their way into the conduit's core. "High Thane Vecris," Seraphina hissed, her skin flaring with a dangerous incandescent violet, a color Kale now recognized as pure, righteous fury. "You will not profane the ancestors' heart." Vecris, a towering Thane, whose armor was adorned with grotesque, jagged metal spikes, turned, his voice a distorted growl. "Seraphina, the lineage of the first resonance has grown stagnant. You cling to ancient ways while we embrace progress. The temple will be reborn, under our control." He raised a massive, crackling energy hammer, and a dozen Thanes arrayed themselves around him. Seraphina wasted no time. She moved, a streak of white light, directly at Vecris, her tendrils blazing. She unleashed a torrent of pure resonance energy, a concussive blast that struck Vecris's personal shield with a deafening roar. But the High Thane was powerful, his shield absorbing the blow, albeit with visible strain. While Seraphina engaged Vecris in a furious duel of raw power, Kale plunged into the chaos of the lesser Thanes. He fought with a desperate ferocity, fueled by the encroaching instability he felt through his connection to Seraphina. The temple's pulse was becoming erratic, flickering, threatening to plunge them into the void. He dispatched 3 Thanees with brutal efficiency, using the ceremonial blade to disarm and disable, his movements a blend of human street fighting and instinctual battle prowess. He felt Seraphina's mounting frustration, the subtle shifts in her energy output as Vecris proved too strong. "He's siphoning the conduit's energy," Seraphina cried through their bond, her physical voice strained. "He's making himself stronger." Kale understood. He had to sever the connection between Vecris and the conduit. It was a desperate gambit. He moved towards the crystalline structure, dodging energy blasts, ignoring the smaller Thanes, his focus solely on the glowing cables that snaked from the conduit to Vecris's armor. He saw his chance. He threw himself at the nearest cable, the ceremonial blade sparking as he jammed it into the conduit's output port, creating a circuit overload. A shower of sparks, a blinding flash of light, and the cable shrieked, then snapped. Vecris roared, stumbling back, his armor crackling, the siphoned energy violently disrupted. Seraphina seized the opening. Her tendrils flared. A final concentrated burst of pure unadulterated resonance. It hit Vecris with the force of a supernova. The High Thane screamed, a guttural, alien sound, as his armor buckled and shattered, his form dissolving into shimmering dust. The remaining Thanes, seeing their leader obliterated, panicked, trying to flee. Kale and Seraphina, a united front, unleashed a final, coordinated assault, driving them back, forcing them into a desperate retreat through the damaged corridors. The battle for the conduit was won, but the cost was etched on Seraphina's face, a profound exhaustion that pulled at Kale's own newly sensitive core. The fight might be over, but the aftermath of their forced unity, and the raw power they had just unleashed, had only just begun. The immediate threat receded, the remaining Thanes fleeing the temple in disarray, their leader a scattering of dust motes. The harmonic conduit, though battered, began to stabilize, its light less frantic, its hum regaining its ancient rhythm. Seraphina sagged, her vibrant blue skin paling to a delicate azure, her tendrils drooping. Kale rushed to her side, catching her as she swayed. "Seraphina? Are you okay?" Her eyes, still wide with the echoes of battle, met his. There was no pretense of formality now, only raw exhaustion and a profound sense of relief. "The temple, it is safe," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "For now, the Thas will not recover quickly from this defeat." She leaned heavily against him, her weight surprisingly light, her breath shallow. The shared trauma, the adrenaline-fueled climax, had stripped away all their defenses. Cal felt the intimate pulse of her life force through their bond, the thrumming of her core, resonance, now muted, weary. He led her to a nearby bench, carefully seating her. The conclave elders, their veils still flickering, descended from their days, their ancient voices filled with cautious awe. "The resonance has held," the glacier-voiced elder stated, his tone reverent. "The lineage of the first resonance is affirmed, and the human, Kale of Terra, has proved an unexpected anchor." Seraphina managed a small, tired nod. His courage, his ingenuity, they were instrumental. She looked at Kale then, a long, searching gaze that held the weight of everything they had just endured. "Your actions, they saved us." Kale felt a blush creep up his neck. "Just doing my part, Seraphina. You weren't exactly a slouch yourself." He glanced at the still humming conduit. "So, the temple's pulse is back to normal? No more accidental cosmic marital obligations." Seraphina's lips, still pale, curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. It was the first genuine smile he had seen on her face. "The resonance is stable. The binding, it is complete. You are now irrevocably linked to my pulse, Kale of Terra, and to the temple's." The premature intimacy arc had culminated in a deep, undeniable bond, a connection far beyond mere ritual. Later, in a quieter, less ornate chamber, they were given time to rest. Seraphina sat on a low, cushioned platform, eyes closed, her tendrils now radiating a soft, steady blue. Kale sat nearby, watching her, the lingering echoes of her emotions in his mind a constant, gentle hum. He thought of the mirror, of her desperate attempt to understand human intimacy, and the stark contrast to the raw, visceral connection they had just forged in battle. "You know," Kale said, breaking the silence, "you never really got the human kiss right. It's more dynamic, less rigid." Seraphina opened her eyes, the starlight in them still weary, but now holding a spark of something new. "It was for data acquisition," she reminded him, though her voice lacked its usual formality. "A necessary cultural comprehension." Kale chuckled. "Sure it was, but you felt it, didn't you? The weirdness, the illogical vulnerability." She was silent for a moment, then her gaze meeting his, she nodded. "Yes," she admitted, her voice soft. "It was perplexing, and now I understand. This resonance, it is similar in its profound vulnerability, yet different in its purpose." "Yeah," Kale murmured. "One's about two people, the other, is about saving a floating city. Apparently, he reached out hesitantly and took her hand. Her fingers, cool and slender, interlaced with his, a strange, perfect fit. The soft blue of her skin pulsed where their hands touched, a silent acknowledgement of their shared bond. So, what now, guardian of the first resonance? You're stuck with a human, permanently. Serafina squeezed his hand, a surprisingly firm grip. The conclave has affirmed my lineage. My status is restored. And your place? Your place is now woven into the temple's core, Kale of Terra. You are a part of us. Her gaze now was steady, direct, and filled with a warmth he hadn't seen before. The cold tactician, the desperate queen, the ritual-bound heiress, they were all still there, but now overlaid with the quiet resolve of a woman who had just found an unexpected anchor in the storm. The cultural stakes had been averted, the external plot resolved, but the true emotional journey, the rebuilding of trust, had only just begun. The connection, born of an awkward misstep and sealed in fire, was undeniably real. The days that followed were a testament to the strange, evolving nature of their bond. The Aersal temples were in a period of repair and reintegration. The conclave of Thanes scattered and largely neutralized, Serafina moved to the restored halls with a quiet authority, her presence now imbued with a new, subtle energy that Kale recognized as the resonance of their completed binding. He, too, felt subtly changed. The constant, soft hum of the temple's pulse was now a familiar undercurrent in his senses, and Serafina's emotional state, once an enigma, was now a quiet echo in his mind, a constant, gentle presence. Their interactions, once formal and laden with unspoken tension, had shed layers of pretense. Serafina was still precise, still ritualistic in her approach to daily life, but moments of dry humor, usually initiated by Kale, were now met with a faint, knowing flicker in her starlit eyes, or a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the light on her skin. You require sustenance, Kale of Terra, she would state, presenting a dish of nutrient paste. Its biosynthesized compounds are optimal for human physiological restoration. Kale would grimace. Looks like melted crayons. Can we get some actual food? You know, the kind that tastes like something other than regret? And Serafina would pause, her tendrils showing a flicker of amusement. Then offer, there is a fermentation process that yields a stimulating effervescence. Would that be acceptable? It was their strange new normal. One evening, Serafina sought him out in the observation dome, where he often sat, gazing at the swirling gas giants below. She stood beside him, her presence a quiet warmth. The conclave has deliberated your future, she said, her voice softer than usual. Cal turned to her. Oh yeah, am I getting my own ritual? Maybe a floating pet rock? Serafina's lips curved into that rare, subtle smile. They have recognized your unique resonance contribution. Your link to the temple's core is unprecedented. You are to be granted the title of Hearth-tender of the First Pulse, a role previously held only by Earthos of the lineage. Carol raised an eyebrow. Hearth-tender? So I'm basically the live-in maintenance guy for your whole civilization? He paused. Then, does it come with a uniform? I look good in gold. Serafina's smile deepened, a radiant warmth spreading through her eyes. It is a title of great honor, Kale. It implies an intimate connection to the temple's vitality, a partnership with its very core, and with its lineage guardian. Her tendrils pulsed with a profound blue, a color of deep emotional sincerity. It means you are truly one of us now, by choice, not just by binding. Kale looked at her, truly seeing the alien woman he had been forced to marry, the cold tactician who had revealed a desperate heart, the ritual-bound heiress who had embraced an unknown destiny. Their bond, forged in embarrassment and sealed in fire, was more than just duty. It was a deep, unshakable connection, a shared history that transcended species and culture. He reached out, gently cupping her cheek. Her skin, cool and smooth, shimmered beneath his touch. So hearth-tender, huh? He murmured. Does that mean you'll finally teach me how to do a proper human kiss? 4. Cultural comprehension, of course. Serafina's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of that original, mortified panic flaring in their depths, before it was quickly replaced by a serene, understanding warmth. Her tendrils pulsed with a vibrant, almost playful violet. "Perhaps," she whispered, her voice husky. She leaned into his touch, her gaze direct, intimate, but not for data acquisition, Kale of Terra, for resonance. And as she closed the small distance between them, her lips, once so awkwardly pursed before a mirror, now met his, tentatively at first, then with a soft, almost imperceptible warmth that echoed the pulse of their combined hearts. It was a new beginning, messy and beautiful, for a relationship forged in the heart of an alien temple, built on a foundation of shared trauma and an unexpected, illogical love.